Good afternoon, everyone. It's 1 o'clock on the dot, and we're going to turn the next hour of your time into a combination of value that will see you step ahead, get ahead, and win in the new environment that we find ourselves in as businesses. First off, again, pay fast. Thank you so much for making these episodes, these webinars possible. The first one was around how you can kill distance through digitization. And we spoke to a fantastic organization built in South Africa in the tall grass, quietly away from the vicious competitiveness of very developed markets, and how they lifted their service, went into the United States of America, and in 7 months did 3 years of revenue. The second event is where we took the most boring business we could find in the tire industry, supplying those tiny, weeny little weights that balance tires. And we digitized the entire front end of a traditional old service. The third event was really around how you now market. How do you use Facebook, Instagram, Google? How do you use LinkedIn? What else is available? The pitfalls and the answers. And today's event is all centered around 3 questions, which I'm going to be sharing with you. The first question, really, which consolidates the context of the day, is what is it that drives change? What is it that drives change? And what happens if you don't respond to change? We're all living in a world of ongoing change. It's never been that different, but the rate and the pace of change has sped up. COVID, as it appeared, has accelerated that further. So here are 3 thought starters. Opportunity drives change. Black Friday, now about 7, 8 years old. Last year in South Africa, over 6 billion rand spent over 1 week. The largest transaction from a customer out of the United Kingdom to a service in South Africa was over 10 million rand. They bought an incentive holiday for their top performing sales folks. Over 7 million transactions through a mixture of online and offline. It's a big event and it concentrates everyone's mindset. It's gone beyond TVs, it's gone beyond vacuum cleaners, and it's now moving and migrating into the services. Not only business to consumer, but business to business too. We're going to talk about that. What else drives change? Well, crises do. Look at what COVID has done. How many of you had absolutely no online interface and engagement with your customers and clients this time last year? And how many of you, out of sheer necessity, were forced into it? Especially important for South Africa, most of us have become accustomed to online shopping. It was driven out of necessity. It has accelerated at a pace second to nothing we have seen. And through that, it's going to create new expectations and new habits. If you don't get into the game, you might be left on the receiving end. And then the last thing that drives change is competition. If you don't get into the game, you might be left in the end. Those businesses that responded fastest, quickest, driven by opportunity, driven by necessity, that recrafted and reset and rebuilt their businesses to go online are the disruptors that we will blame COVID for. But in fact, COVID has come. COVID will be here for a while. COVID will go. We will blame COVID for the changes in our industries. But in fact, it was those businesses that stepped ahead, capitalizing on the change in order to reshape the industry or sector. A personal story, something that some of you might be able to identify with. When I was a kid, I used to watch my father get out of bed at 6:30 in the morning. He would walk down the short driveway and he would pace up and down by the gate. And he would wait for the delivery of the business day at 6:30 a.m. And he needed the business day because once he collected it, he would go straight to the toilet and sit down and have his moment of movement whilst catching up on the news. It put him in a position that set his day, and it put him in a position where he could have a really good, positive day ahead. If the newspaper did not arrive, he would be grumpy for the rest of the day. Think of that in relation to your customers. Think of what you do in relation to that and your customers, and look where he is today. Today, anytime, anywhere, anyhow, he gets the news he wants, as he wants it, when he wants it. No longer does he have to sit on the loo at 6:30. It might be at 9, it might be at 11, it could be at midnight. Everything worked. If we don't get ahead and we don't step up to the opportunities created by crises, by competition, and by opportunity, as businesses will be left behind. The context today is all around digitized, customized services that get configured online, eventually bought online, and perhaps even delivered online or offline. Mass customization is the edge of competition. We all need to move and migrate towards it. So to get us there, I have a panel which I'd love to introduce you to. Each of them direct experience in the game, each of them experts in their own right. And with me I have Matt, the killer of holiday brochures, Smith. He is the architect of enabling tourists and holidaymakers to eventually move online and completely configure their exact customized tours suited to their needs. He innovated the space, he led the space, and he did so through one of the largest tour operators globally, Thomas Cook. Matt, thank you for being with us. Next to Matt, I have Jonathan, and his alias is I can do it better, faster, cheaper than everyone else, Smith. As founder of PayFast, Jonathan decided the time had come to enable online payments in a far simpler, smoother, easier, and affordable manner. Melanie van Biljon, or as I like to call her, I will find more meaning, value, and success in building legal services to SMEs. It's been a point of continuous failure. Legal expertise is expensive, and you cannot be a good lawyer unless you have a big fountain outside your office. For us as SMEs, that kind of skill and capability is inaccessible. Melanie has solved it. And then finally, Glenn, the VR, AR, innovator, collaborator, instigator, when those technologies were cranky and old. Gillis, who started a business, Sea Monster, with the view to adopt the first rudimentary versions of artificial reality and virtual reality into the commercial space through gaming methodologies to bring to life customer experiences. Gentlemen, ladies, it is a pleasure to have you with me. Thank you for giving up the time. Let's do this. Matt, I'm going to start with you. The killer of tour brochures. I mean, what is wrong, Matt? Why did you have to ruin this experience? I want to go on a holiday. So what do? I get into my car. I drive through the traffic. I eventually find a travel agency. I edge into a tight parking. I buy a ticket to pay for the parking. I then thought that I would walk into the travel agency. I sit down at this awkward desk with a really warm travel agent who starts to pull out brochure upon brochure upon brochure. And from there, I select a brochure that gives me an experience of a holiday or a tour that seldom matches up to the pictures in the brochure, What was wrong with that, man? Why did you have to change it?
You're forgetting the endless paper cuts from thumbing through the brochures as well. So be mindful of that. Why would you do that? Essentially, time and effort. People are evolving, technology is evolving, and people want to do that in the comfort of their own homes. Not only that, if you strip it back to business, the costs that businesses have to undertake to have these bricks and mortar establishments with countless people there servicing people as they come through the door or during the quiet times when they're not there, and the time it takes for them to then construct a tour. If you think about a tour being built up of three key components, commonly a flight, commonly a hotel or some form of accommodation, and then transfers, the time it takes to do that, having to engage with multiple airline websites, multiple transfer or car hire websites, and multiple hotel websites. And the whole time that it takes to do that was just enormous. You either barely scratch the surface and deliver a substandard service, or you're just there for hours upon hours on end. So we tackled it purely from a time perspective and to make the rules far more efficient by delivering all of that experience within a single interface. And
why could you have not made it simple? Why could you have not just simply said, Pavlo, go to my website. There are a bunch of pictures over there. In fact, the website's really a digitized brochure more than anything else.
Yeah.
That would have been good enough. Why did you have to go that extra step of letting me configure the entire tour?
Everyone's different needs. So if you go back to what I was in travel for 18 years, and I know I don't look old enough. Don't flatter me. But if you go back 18 years ago, the only thing you could do in travel was you pick up your Thomas Cook brochure, you thumb through, you're all going for 7 or 14 nights, and you're going to same or similar hotels. You all get on the coach at your designated drop-off points, and that's how it was, and that's how it had been for many years. But people's lives evolved, so businesses evolved, and people didn't just work Monday to Friday. People were working weekends. People's annual leave were at different times, and people wanted to go for shorter breaks. And throwing all of that into the mix, you couldn't build and pre-package the tours to meet the demand and to meet everybody's changing needs. And that's just changing needs for when people want to travel and want to move around. You then have needs in people wanting a different class of things and might want an upgraded flight seat, or might want a slightly private transfer, a Mercedes transfer, or something nicer. And the opportunities are endless. And over time, all of these businesses started up to offer the services, but you couldn't scratch the surface with it. You couldn't. If you were searching, when we first generated our platform, we were searching 65 airlines in the press of a button. Yeah. The time it takes an agent to search 65 airlines, wait for a response and look at the best price and work through everything and compare the classes, you're talking hours upon hours. Or they just take a half-hearted approach and they go, well, I'll just go for these common ones and the price is what it is, which you then deliver a substandard service. And for a brand and a business like Thomas Cook that was all about the high street, all about their heritage in travel, the founders of travel, they wanted to still deliver that personal service and get all opportunities, all options on the table for individuals. And we solved that through technology. And we not only solved it through technology that an end user could go online and do it themselves directly, but our technology was also offered in the 1,000, 1,500 Thomas Cook stores, where if you want to sit and have a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, and talk and chew the fat with a consultant that may have been there and has some background on there, then you could do that as well. And we tried to deliver that all-encompassing experience. So we delivered the efficiencies in stores, and once we delivered those efficiencies in stores, we then looked at how do we replicate that in-branch, that in-store experience through an online engine as well. So you can build your tours and pick them together in a store, but then how do you close that gap on online? And that all came down to content, relevant content, leveraging things like live chat so that you don't necessarily have to pick up the phone or go into a branch, but you could have a live chat with somebody online that has actually been there and can talk you through what to do. And then we start to drop in things like tickets and experiences that you could do when you're on the ground as well. So yeah, it evolved and it kept evolving over time as well.
That's so fascinating because, Melanie, if I think about it, a legal contract, the ability to dispense a legal contract, a shareholders agreement, an employment contract, a non-disclosure agreement between one party and another, or 5 parties or 6 parties, in the same way as in tourism, as in the creation of a holiday, an experience, it is very fragmented with many, many, many moving parts that make up the whole. A legal contract is no different. So where do you even begin? Because most services that I see for legal contracts online are answer a couple of questions, we'll take your email questions, we'll populate a contract and email it back to you. Is that what digitizing a legal agreement or the ability to dispense a legal agreement is all about?
Hopefully not. What we try and do by automating legal services is really from learning. So what you try and do is you say, okay, from our experience, we know there are these typical 5 or 6 scenarios, and you build those out and you give users the ability to choose from different options, but inform them as to what the choices are from that choosing. But the idea is by automating these solutions, not just giving people a template, but giving them guidance, empowering them to understand what it is that they are trading off and the decisions that they are making, and actually allowing them to do this on demand at an affordable rate and easy to use. And of course, if there is human intervention necessary, that can be done, but it's not always necessary, and you could possibly cater for 80% of the scenarios needed.
So in the instance, Matt said, for example, when a tour was designed, when I'm customizing my tour, there would be a little chat function that was available. There would be some suggestions that appear as I click on certain elements of configuring my tour for myself. Does it work like that in a legal contract? Or is there a lawyer sitting in a dark room watching the keystrokes and suggesting what you ought to be doing and ought to be adding in order to get the right legal contract established between you and that third party?
So initially, how it works is that when drafting the different options available to you, the lawyers take into consideration if the scenario is X, these are the typical options, and this is how you should choose between them. And they provide those options to you in a good template. They'll say to you, these are the alternatives. If there's more time and effort and value and spend it on this, and we believe that as more people will use this and the data is collected, you will have the wonderful advantage that you will now have business analytics or business intelligence, then you'll have machine learning, and you'll have artificial intelligence, where all of this will become a much more richer and brilliant experience to cater for the more nuanced situations and be a lot more customized. But today, if you get to a certain point, of course, there's human intervention that can happen to make sure that if there are uncertainties, you can cater to those particularities, but no dark rooms, don't worry.
No dark rooms, that's good to hear. It still worries me, it sounds scary. Imagine you and I going into business and we're going to sit in front of a screen with some algorithm or machine learning capability or some configuration capability and put together a legal agreement. How do we make it more interesting? How do we gamify it and make it more engaging, more meaningful, more tangible, more real?
So in actual fact, I find it very exciting and thrilling that it's based on machine learning. Firstly, it takes a lot of good quality data into account. It eliminates a lot of subjectivity, and hopefully your transaction is interesting enough that the whole experience will be quite interesting. And I think the experience is quite a fun experience because there's a lot of learning in the different options and the optionality available to you. But maybe I'm just a geek, I don't know.
I think you are just a legal geek. I want to go to a gamer. Gamers who do this right.
Glenn, I know the guy.
How do you bring it to life?
Yeah, so absolutely. And it's amazing to hear because there are two things that stand out from both you, Melanie, and Matt. And that is firstly the power of story, whether you're a lawyer and you're talking about these different kind of scenarios and so on. And of course, painting this picture of your ideal holiday is really just selling a dream. And stories ultimately really are how we make sense of the world. It's how we learn. It's what brands are about. And if you think about it, we tell stories for social reasons, to inform, to educate, to transact with one another, and of course, just to entertain each other. And technology doesn't actually influence that at all. Those reasons have been there since we started speaking to one another. What technology does fundamentally do is change how we can do that, how we distribute that, how we disintermediate, which is one of the themes emerging here too. And then it also does much more than that, and that is that it gives the power of interactivity real expression. Now, how do you then make sense of interactivity? Well, again, humans have been doing this for the longest time, and they've been using games to do it. And so we do what's called serious games. That doesn't mean that they are serious, they need to be engaging because they're competing with other ones out there, but they're driving outcomes like business, learning, or social outcomes, and so on. So what makes a game then? Well, firstly, the rules. Okay, so I need to understand very clearly how to do this. And again, legal rules, precedents exist, or the rules that exist in the tourism industry around how things work. Feedback, of course, is critical, and both ways on that. And then having some sort of win state, a goal. So ultimately, I get what I want, and then I know I need to stop. But how's this for the most powerful part of that definition? Games are voluntary. The alternative is called work, and that's why they've got to pay us to do it. And so if you think about the future of online marketing, opt-in, it really is saying, guys, I need to make you want to do this. And if I can get that narrative teed up, then we really are using the power of games to not only structure, but really honor and give agency to our audience. And technology is simply the enabler for that.
So the transition from work to fun, Glenn, it's going to start with eliciting emotion, I guess. And eliciting emotion, whether it be buying a tour or writing a legal contract, means you need to activate more than just the senses you'd be using on a flat screen. How would you bring that to?
Well, the answer is absolutely that technology, augmented reality particularly, is people talk about AR and VR, and we tend to talk about them in one sentence.
Sorry, Glenn. What is this augmented reality thing? What is it?
Okay. It's like, dude, it's going to change the world. Okay, so there's going to be all these digital things, and we're going to lay them over the real world. And can you imagine 10 years ago running around Cape Town and everyone's like, "Oh, you're from Cape Town. You've been seeing things, have you?" So no, it absolutely. I mean, listen, the best example of it is GPS. We took a digital layer and we put it over the real world, and that's the simplest, most powerful form of AR. So you've got a device, typically your phone, and what you're doing is you're just putting a digital image. It can be a pop-up, it can be static, it can be sound, it can be any of those things. A very mature technology, 2 billion plus devices in the world. They're called smartphones, and they're ready to go. Look at what Apple and everyone else is doing, and this is going to be a fundamental way that we connect the real and the digital world together. Because again, if I'm talking about traveling or looking around me, why do I need to see that information in a 2D kind of way? Actually, I just want something that is visual and contextual. And pops up when I need it. And so gradually, as we get to glasses and then whatever ever comes from there, it is going to become the default way that we experience this blended world. Virtual reality is actually almost exactly the opposite. And what that's doing is that's taking us and putting us in an entirely digital world, immersing us in that world. And that's only just starting to come out of the disappointment curve. It's definitely not as mature as AR, but there are absolutely use cases that make sense right now, and those are typically where you come to me. So heavy training, some of the tourism and travel use cases make sense because those devices are still relatively expensive and they're only a handful in the world.
Okay, great. So I've got it now. So I went to a website. I picked up on Matt's work. When I look at the tour and where I want to go, you might well fold in, fit in, weave in, stitch in augmented reality, virtual reality in order to give me not only an intellectual experience of reading about the tour, but a visual experience where I can look around and see the resort, where I can look around and see the canyon that I want to take a tour into. And on that basis, I'm able to then have a closer sense of what the real life experience would be through a digital experience. Or in the case, Milani, as I've done with you, I acquire that contract. I want to make sure that Jonathan, Matt, myself, and yourself are all aligned on the contract. We go through a process of guidance around it. We feel empowered, we feel informed, we feel in control in a trusting way. And then I come to Jonathan, who now wants me to pay. Jonathan, why? Why? Because every time, mostly, I've tried to pay. Oh my word, do I have to go through a process of administration and complexity where all the fun that was offered in Matt's tour, all the ease offered by Milani's contracts, and the process of engagement experienced through Glenn's work, I now come to you and you want me to fill in 1,001 forms. What is the challenge of getting payment systems properly embedded and almost invisible so we can take and convert the inspiration behind the purchase into the transaction that lets me then have it delivered?
Yeah, absolutely, Pavlo. I was actually sort of thinking about this while everyone else was talking about how, really, if I'm doing my job, if payment service providers are doing their job, we should be seamless. We should be invisible to the whole transaction. It shouldn't be hard to get someone to pay for that holiday that they want, for that contract that they want, for that game that they're playing. It really shouldn't be. And I think payment systems have come a long way. I think we're definitely, it's definitely got a lot better. I mean, there's still a lot that can be done. But yeah, it's actually been wild to see over the last, decade and more that I've been in this business, how things have improved. I mean, I think one of the first challenges for commerce years ago, digital commerce, was payment, right? That was a hurdle. And I think that kind of largely got relatively solved. I mean, there's been some great evolution in the last number of years. But then it moved on. If you're talking about retail to other things, it moved on to the e-commerce platforms that were around that weren't very mature, that needed to be matured. And then kind of now, I think one of the bigger challenges is logistics, especially in a country like South Africa, where we've got a very high sort of regional, and that doesn't necessarily matter for digital experiences, but once we get into the real world, that's generally where most of these digitally contracted kind of experiences end up in the physical world at some point, and someone's got to take a box from point A to point B. And in South Africa, at least, point B could be farm number 4 down the dirt road, past the big tree, down to the fork in the road kind of thing. We do have a lot of those. But absolutely to your point, payment service providers need to be as seamless as possible. But I think that's got a lot better. More people now have cards that can be used online, whereas historically it was only the credit cards. EFT has become a massive boon for the buying public in South Africa and other parts of the world as well, where alternative payment mechanisms have kind of come to the fore. So I think more and more people are able to engage and transact online, whereas historically, in South Africa, it was a very small subset of the population. That has definitely expanded, right? So that, consuming public has become a much, much bigger pool than what it used to be.
I've watched the evolution from brick to click and then the combination of the two. And although they're a company in sheer distress at the moment, Clark's Shoes, which is as old as the hills, used to make an incredible boot It was a boot designed for you to walk around and slosh around in the wet, rainy, muddy island called the United Kingdom. Am I right, Matt? That's the weather that you've got today. Very different to the weather we have today down here. But what was interesting about it is the way that they convinced me as a doubting Thomas, as a doubting South African, as someone unsure as to whether I could trust this online experience. The way they converted me is after I stepped into one of their stores. I went down into the basement, which is where the men's section was in Regent Street. I tried on the shoes. I saw 2 good boots that would last a lifetime. And when I acquired them, the cashier turned around and said, "Sir, what are you doing for the rest of your day?" And I thought to my mind, well, what's that got to do with anything? She said to me, if you're going to be lugging these around, now that you've paid for them and you have the till slip to demonstrate that you have paid for them, I'll commit to delivering them at no cost to your postal address by noon tomorrow. It was an enormous convenience. I had the safety of the till slip. Proof of payment made. I would expect delivery. And exactly at noon the next day, the shoes arrived. Subsequently from that, I've never gone into another store. Every purchase has been made online. In that instance, Matt, when you spoke about creating this service, you kept it live at all the various physical points of service too. Was that part of the thinking? Was the thinking to migrate people from the pure physical to a click and mortar or click and brick, and eventually into a pure online space?
Yeah, that's everything we wanted to replicate. And what you've just mentioned there about Clark's shoes is a fantastic example. So Thomas Cook have been renowned for years for being travel agencies and being the core of their business. Clark and the experience that you get around that when you visit one. Clark's shoes are exactly the same. I don't think there's a household in the UK that when they have their first child and they're ready to get up and walk and get their first pair of shoes, I would say every household in the UK will take their first child for their first pair of shoes, and there will be a Clark's pair of shoes because of the service that you get. And it's an experience, and the experience that people buy into. And that will always exist. That will always exist. Things like that, because people will always do that. You can absolutely enhance those experiences online with the augmented reality and things like that. And I wish when I was in travel 6-7 years ago that the technology was available then, because that was the next part of our journey that we were embarking upon. Yeah. How do you bring that experience to life? People love to touch and feel things before they proceed with a transaction. And to bring a holiday to life, or even a hotel, to be able to put on the glasses or a headset and to be able to navigate around the reception or a hotel room that you're looking to inquire on, that just blows it out of the water. And you then elevate that whole experience, both online and within a travel agency, to such a next level that it's unbelievable. The technology we have today and the way we can apply the stories, the experiences in such a different way, and also enhance the traditional way, is out there, and it's fantastic. And we always took that approach. It wasn't a case of firing up a website, plugging in loads of APIs and feeds. It was picking it back to the consumer, and everything we do is data driven. Yeah, I've always been very data driven in my background, and it's what we do at the core of the business today. Is analyzing the data points and understanding where the users are going and where they're coming from and where they're looking to go, and enhancing their experience through personalization or through augmented reality, and simplifying the experience. So the biggest challenge we had with flexible trips within Thomas Cook was when we'd spun everything up, your offering is here. Yeah, we could have packaged over 200, 300, 400 million different packages together. And then how on earth do you surface the right thing to the right individual at the right time? And we then mined into the data, we leveraged personalization, and we took that on the next part of the journey. And that's where you take the experiences. We then brought on videographers to go out and video the properties because we couldn't get augmented reality and the likes at the time. So the next best thing was, you don't just want to see a photo anymore, you want to see a video, or you want to see a drone footage of the hotel. And we were going to the next level with it all. And it's all about bringing it to life and bringing that experience to life.
So let's get to the nub of this over here. Melanie, when I meet with you as an attorney, I form a communication, I see you, you see me, we connect, we relate. Contracts are scary because it's all about risk and opportunity. And I need to see and feel and touch and know that you get me before I can trust your advice. In the instance where you're working 99% of the time online, as Matt has just said, in order to learn and understand and not lose touch and not get a wrong signal from whether a contract's working or not, you need that data and you need to be able to read that data. Does that mean when you configure a service which is traditionally delivered in a face-to-face environment, when you construct that service and build out that service, you need to understand, what is it? Keystrokes? Is it the number? Is it the time that I spend completing the contract? What are the data points you typically need to understand how the user and consumer is behaving?
100%. That was one of the hardest learnings for us, because it was really experiment, observe and refine and adapt, because it is a big, especially because you talk about trust here. It's not something that people want that guarantee. So it was really about understanding what is more needed or what is more important and valuable for a consumer. And that took us a while to figure out, and we're still learning. I don't think it's something that you'll ever stop learning from. So for us, it's about data, 100% data, and making sure we understand it, making sure we evaluate it, and making sure we engage with our users to make sure they have that comfort. They are on the right journey, checking in. Are you happy? Did this serve this purpose? And then, yeah, working from there.
So in effect, when you build out the service, you need to build out the points of contact or the points of interaction or the points of inflection that all produce a data instance. You need to collect the data, you need to organize it, and you need to learn to read it. Because in many ways, what your online service should be offering, whatever the online service is, when you customize a package, a service, you need to make me as the user feel that I am 100% heard, understood, that it's customized entirely around me, and yet you might never, ever, ever meet me. Those data points are important. And when you want to bring something to life, Glenn, and you gamify it, and you start to introduce the really cool technologies that Matt was referring to in the tourism industry, and something that I, Glenn, directly experienced. I had an intervention with Burberry about 5 years ago, and I interviewed the head of Burberry in Regent Street. They had just launched their new flagship store. And what happened was this: I walked into the store, and as I walked in, I was greeted by this goddess. I noticed there were also godlike men there too. They evidently would serve the ladies. I was served by a lady. And she walked me around the store. There was a distinctive smell in the store. As we walked past the various products, the backgrounds changed, and she put into my hands the famous Burberry trench coat. And she said, try this on. And she sent me into a changing room with 6 mirrors. It was a hexagon shape. And as I stepped in and she closed the door, 3 of the mirrors turned into TV sets. And before I knew it, Glenn, on that TV set, I saw the sheep from which the wool of the Burberry coat had been sheared in the highlands of Scotland. I heard the wind blow. I saw a very dignified man hand stitching the leather belt with a double stitch thread. And the product came to life through what was in effect, am I right, a crude form of augmented reality.
Yeah, absolutely. We've just launched a showpiece, put it out to the world called Destination AR, and we've done this in collaboration with the Western Cape government and Table Mountain and City of Cape Town. And it's just exactly that point, because that's an amazing experience. And clearly you're earning too much money if you're shopping in London. So yeah, we'll chat to your producer because maybe she can help us out as well. But you're right, that immersiveness. And so Destination AR is really exactly what you and Matt are sort of alluding to, and it prints it out. It's a little poster, use your phone on it. And then what it does is it layers in a whole lot of stories about Cape Town and Cape Point, for example. So you can hear the myths and legends. You can find out more about the great tourist attractions and stuff. And so what you're describing there is really those stories that kind of bring it to life. And yeah, it's free, it's great for homeschooling. But of course, what's happening in the background is we are measuring all of the data points. So imagine that instead of flipping through a website, you literally are experiencing this thing in the comfort of your own home. But when it says to you, listen, I see you now want to come and visit Cape Town, but I can have a look and I can see, oh, look, you looked at all the adrenaline activities, or you wanted to go on the red bus. I can now customize and bring something to you in that way. But if I might, I want to just say that there's another way to think about it. AR and VR, absolutely. But the work that we're doing with Capitech on the Living It Up game is very, very insightful as well, because we're taking our understanding of these user personas. And, trust is a psychological process. It doesn't come from sharing more information. It comes from a relationship with archetype. And this is a game that teaches you the world's most boring subject, which is around budgeting and money and financial education, also known as the world's most important topic, but nevertheless, And so what we've done in that game is we've just given people a safe way to fail, to set dreams, to try different strategies on that. But here's the interesting thing, that to Matt's point around the data insights, we're starting to see patterns in the way that you play the game and whether you repay your credit on time. And isn't that incredible? So traditionally, the way that money was lent was basically using these trailing indicators, credit scores and things like that. But now what we're doing is we're starting to get insight into who you are as a person and how resilient you are. Oh, look, he played and failed, succeeded. Oh, is that a measure of resilience? And is there a correlation between how you do your resilience and your ability to pay back debt? Actually, there is. And so again, yes, AR and VR are incredible technologies and we should look for them. But right now, right here, there are world-class examples of how we can actually blend in the story, our understanding of people, and using the data to then present back to them things in a very comfortable, intuitive kind of way. And I guess that's the general theme from what we're hearing from all the great panelists.
Very much so. And that brings me on to Jonathan. Do you collect data, Jonathan? Do you get a sense of how confident and comfortable people are online when they make their payments? What does payment behavior tell you? The interface around me now having designed or customized my service online, excited by it, convinced by it, feel confident with it, conclude my transaction around it, I come to the payment process. Can you tell whether someone needs support or doesn't need support? And how do you manage that in order to get someone committed to building confidence specifically in a pay fast instance, as opposed to the many other competitors?
It's kind of interesting listening to the panelists talk about all this customization, and it's opening sort of my mind a bit to some of the opportunities that we actually have in terms of the payment world. So data collecting, of course, yes, definitely, but it's not so unique. It's not kind of so customizable. So there's potentially some opportunities around commerce there. Really, we've known for years that we sit at this confluence of a few different things, of customers or consumers and merchants, various businesses, people transacting. So we do sit on a lot of data, but it's more trends, right? It's more about, what were the devices people were using when they were transacting, and how has that changed over time? What are the industries? Where are they spending money? Who are the merchants that are coming online? What are they selling? A number of years ago, it was quite traditional in terms of online retail. I would say traditional because it's retail, and now it's become a lot more diverse, right? So whether they're paying for travel, which is obviously a big sector, or services where it's being accountants, lawyers, whoever else, medical, your what you call it, pathology bills, there's loads of those sort of things. It's just become anything and everything, school fees, as well as all the online shopping, which gives us all a few hits of dopamine here and there, which is great. Lots of data, but it's not sort of customizable in the way that you're sort of alluding to, or the way that the panelists have kind of mentioned. So there could be some interesting opportunity there.
It will be, and I think that they are still coming. And of course, your environment is heavily governed by regulation and all sorts of ominous threats should you step out of certain regulatory frameworks. I suppose that in itself lends a bit of a constraint. But then what makes a good payment experience for me? And it's a question that was interestingly raised over here. And please, folks, send your questions through. We're going to now move into Q&A. I would love to hear your views. I'd love to hear your thoughts. There's some great questions that have come through, which I'd like to direct at you, my fellow panelists. But please continue to send your questions through. What we're going to conclude with, incidentally, is we are going to create a customizable service for an attendee of this webinar. Let us know what business you're in. Give us a challenge and say, this is my business. It is profoundly physical. Where would I even begin to customize this as a service for delivery, or rather for acquisition and customization online, whether I deliver it online or offline? Let us know what business you're in, and I'm going to pick one of you. The first question I've got is to Matt from Brandon. So Matt, we spoke about, and this is playing right into the heart of what you do nowadays. Folks, Matt used to be with Thomas Cook. He's now the CEO of a business called Web Trends Optimize, Matt? Yep, it's CRO. Let me quickly see in the chat line, who knows what CRO stands for? And don't Google it, that's cheating. Do not Google it. What does CRO stand for? Jonathan, you should be sharp in this. Milani, if you don't have it in play, you're losing out on a gig. Glenn, I'm guessing you know what it is. I certainly hope so. But let's just take it away. Matt, CRO?
So it's conversion rate optimization. So
what does it mean practically, in a nutshell?
In practical terms, what do? We analyze users' websites through our technology, through our experience, using all of the various data points for people visiting their websites, people transacting, people viewing products, and we draw upon hypotheses on how to improve that experience.
Okay, so it's SEO.
No. SEO gets more people to the website. We, the people on the website, we make them convert at a higher rate.
Okay, so I've now gone down the road of customizing my service, be it a legal contract. I've now gone down the road of crafting and creating a gamified experience to engage with customers and clients, specifically with the view to build trust and gather data. I then market my service. People come to the website. I still don't get it. What's important about CRO?
So it's basically about any friction point on your website. Yeah, it's smoothing that whole experience. What a lot of businesses fall foul of, form fields. Yeah, everybody becomes snowblind with form fields on a website. Why are you asking me 50 questions if I don't need to do them? Yeah. So we analyze those form fields and we look at where the friction points are and where people fall out. And then we test two form variations, basically the existing and our hypotheses, and we measure the conversion, the interaction, and churn through the traffic. We also personalize the experience so that when users are coming back, they're presented with things, or when we've gleaned information about users, we present the right things at the right time. And this is all signposting to get people to navigate through and ultimately purchase at the end of it. So it's the modern day version of the end of your supermarket aisle offers and your big signs in the supermarket that are pointing out the best items or the key things for you. It's the modern day equivalent of that, and it's getting people from the first click through to the very last click being a transaction on the website.
So in many ways, that activity could sit well on Melani's website, where she is offering these customizable legal contracts.
Yeah.
And Glenn, it would sit well in you working with Melani to really turn that process of concluding, completing, engaging with the thought process, understanding why certain clauses are needed in a shareholders agreement or not, to bring that to life in an unthreatening way.
Yeah.
And it works especially well in understanding the points of friction, Jonathan, that you mentioned around the payment transaction. So building this out is well and good, but if you can't translate the experience of someone you never meet and see, because the entire process and engagement with your customer is online, if you can't translate that experience into data points, and you don't have the ability to read the data points, in effect, it's a non-starter. It's almost like running half the marathon and not completing and concluding the race.
Yeah, it all becomes about perspective. Yeah, and it's standing in the shoes of the consumer and looking at what you want them to see and how you want to be presented as a business. And you've got your SEO, where that starts to drive the traffic. You've got PPC to drive traffic. And as your traffic picks up, we then analyze the data points, we stand in their shoes, and we take them further and drive them through that experience. So friction points. So in a legal scenario, we've legal and sort of buying insurance or buying a mortgage. We've got clients that are in that space. And when we've worked with them, the clients have really long journeys and lots of pages and forms to navigate through. So analysis that we put together will show where friction points are. And with legal forms and things like that, people expose a lot of information to you. So you can understand who's slightly at the more mature end of the scale, and may require a little bit more assistance to someone that's a bit more younger, dynamic, used to online transactions. So in that scenario, we personalize, and things like your live chat, so your online chat capabilities, we'll fire that a lot quicker for someone that's at the more mature end of the scale. So, it's all a bit confusing, isn't it? Do you want to talk to us and we'll take you through this? And we'll be more on point with things like that. And it's about understanding that and pulling people through that experience.
So this goes back to the data, goes back to the way you design and construct this.
Yeah.
But I need to understand something here, Glenn. What you do sounds expensive. I'm a small business. I want to embark on this journey. I want to try and engage my clientele, my customers online in a sequence of steps, an evolution per se. But as a small business, I have a limited budget. Melani, you've been there. Jonathan, you certainly have when you started. Where do we begin, Glenn? What is the starting point? How do we get to base level 1 of 15 levels to create the final experience?
So people do think that these things are expensive, and I say yes, except compared to all your alternatives. Because what exactly were you going to do to future-proof your business to scale them? And they don't need to necessarily be massively expensive to get going. And again, if you work with professionals and you have a strategic approach to these things, of course, they become massively cost effective at scale. And that's the one benefit that we have. Again, with Capitec and examples like that, we're talking about fractions of a cent, compared to bidding 250 Rand for the word insurance, for example. So there really is no comparison. But I understand Capitec had some budget to get the process rolling. And of course, we had to build that business case. I would say to you, the one thing that you do need to think about is do understand your users and your user personas. to understand these user journeys. I think we're all kind of saying the same thing, and the friction points, and that is a lot of thinking that should be knowledge that is self-evident to you, and try to be clear about what it is that is your unique thing, because it isn't about the knowledge. The knowledge is there. It is about the experience and that trusted relationship. And maybe let me just close out this by saying that you have to start a process about building your digital twins. And what a digital twin is if you make a physical product of some kind, you need to make sure that you are ready and that you are building the digital equivalent of that. And that's relatively cheap to get that process going. And we won't yet understand fully where and how to use that thing, but we'll repurpose it. It's only expensive the first time. You're going to find 50 different ways to use it in the next 5 years, and that I guarantee.
Am I right in saying that the technology is evolving? Because with any new technology, everything you build is a native build. It's from first principles. Already what I'm seeing, as we have seen extensively with Shopify platforms, creating a fairly unifiable, easily accessible, super cheap to access e-commerce front end, I'm seeing a lot of these technologies now start providing similar platforms that integrate well into Shopify. And Jonathan, this is something you know a lot about, creating a marketplace. PayFast sits in the heart of a market. What is this marketplace idea? Because that might be a very good place to start if you're looking at evolving a journey like this for your business.
Well, look, I mean, I suppose it depends on some people have different thoughts about what that means. But I mean, marketplaces in the commerce world are where you've got, a large provider that's maybe got the budget and the skill to engage with services like Matt, able to look at all those data points, right, where you maybe as a small business don't, right? So you engage with them to actually sell the product or the service that you're trying to sell, and you pay them a certain amount of money, which at scale for you as the SME is not an inordinate amount of money, but because they've got so many clients, they're able to put that all together and create a great platform. So typically, e-commerce marketplaces would be things like Takealot in South Africa, or Put or Buy or eBay. So they spend all this money to try and build these engagement tools to get customers over the line, and you as a potential merchant using those marketplace platforms get the benefit of that immense investment that they put into these kind of technologies. That's kind of where marketplaces are.
Yes, so concentrates eyes of multiple stakeholders on a service that you offer that could be bought discreetly or separately through a far more effective way. In effect, they're doing some of the heavy lifting to attract attention. Panel members, we are running out of time. There are questions that have come through over here. Everyone who has sent a question through, once we complete the webinar today, because I promised to finish on time, we as the panel members will take a little bit of time to answer each of these questions. And when you receive the thank you email for attending, those answers to Clifford Udelman will be there. Denver, Shahen's always asking questions, good questions. Kerry, we will answer your questions without any question of doubt. I want to end off with one quick round. I have a kitchen design business. I design kitchens. I typically visit you at your home. Once you have found me, either through the yellow pages, which incidentally, folks, I got delivered to me on Monday. I swear they delivered it to my home. I didn't know that they existed any longer. In any event, someone found my service. They've asked me to come to their home. I step into their home. I measure up the kitchen. We sit down and I do a series of sketches, including a mood board. And eventually they contract with me, Milani, to get the kitchen built and delivered. And finally, Jonathan, I need to pay. Wow, what a physical experience. If I can go around the panel, what are the 2 or 3 things that you could tell me around how I would begin digitizing that service in order for me to buy the service online, pay for it online, and have installation done offline? Matt, let's start with you. What are the 2 or 3 things I should be thinking?
I think for me, it's bringing the service to life. So it's creating that ease and that ability to see all the options, see the choice available, and providing the right tools to enable people to input their own measurements or take a photo or something of that nature that enables it to come to life. I don't want to steal what Glenn's probably going to say, but I think there's a textbook scenario that's coming up shortly that brings that experience together in its entirety, and really not only brings it to life, but people can visualize themselves stood in that new kitchen, which completely closes the loop. So I think the web platform, the e-commerce platform, becomes a pick and mix selector. You're picking your hinges, you're picking your handles, you're picking your doors, you're picking your surfaces, and you're going through a checklist. So you create a checklist scenario of elements that you need, and then bring that to life for them. And I'll let you hand to Glenn now.
So Glenn, Matt's given us a step, and we have a bill of quantities. We know exactly what the kitchen needs to have in it. How do you give me a sense of which designs I like? How would you do it?
Yeah, so absolutely. It's a perfect use case for augmented reality. It really, really is. And you guys definitely have nailed it. Just imagine looking around, seeing these things, swapping out exactly as Matt, my lovely assistant, has described it. And I want to tell you one last thing just in closing, and that is that when people think about gameplayers, they think about two teenagers sitting in their underpants on somebody's couch. Take that out of your mind. So Homescapes is a massive game. And the big secret in the gaming community is that the women 35 to 55-year-old are the richest seam of game players in the world. They're playing a game right now called Homescapes, which does exactly this. It's just in a very cartoonified way. So your customers are really ready. I hope you are too.
Excellent. Melanie, I've now bought this kitchen. What would you do and what would you add to it in order to give me confidence that what I'm buying and about to pay for with Jonathan online is what will be delivered?
I think that's the major thing. I think is to give a consumer that trust and confidence that what they're seeing in augmented reality is actually what they're going to get. And if they're not happy, what do they do about it? And it's really making them feel that it's a safe place, that they can transact there, and making sure that they are aware in the most convenient, comfortable way that, they can transact. And if they're not happy, what are the options available to them? So,
Jonathan, I now come to you. I'm confident through Matt brought me to the website. Glenn helped me design my kitchen online. Melani's given me confidence that when I make the payment, the terms and conditions are such that they've been customized to my suitability capabilities. I now need to make the payment and I don't have enough cash. Where does a payment system become a basis to create loan installments? Is that not the next step?
There's a lot of energy that's actually going into these kind of things. I mean, historically, we had credit cards, which would fill that gap. I think people have kind of eschewed that a little bit and have moved a little bit away from cards. But there's this burgeoning field of online credit. There's this burgeoning installment payment mechanisms that are entering the market. I think the key thing for any merchant online in this process or anything else is to try and make payment as seamless as possible, which means providing your customer with as many options as possible to pay. It's kind of part of the customization. Not everyone is the same. Some people have different cards, different phones, whatever. Also being sure that it can actually work on mobile these days. That's a kind of key tip for the audience. There's been this massive transition to mobile. But that's really it, making it as easy as possible, as seamless as possible, presenting many options and making sure that it works across multiple devices. That's just nuts and bolts stuff.
Excellent. Folks, it's a multidisciplinary process. It's not simple, yet it is simple. What I can tell you is that there's not one business out there, not one, maybe one or two, but not many that cannot be digitized in terms of the customer engagement, service development, construction and design piece. If you can get that right, what it means is on the back of my kitchen design and installation business. Because I got to Matt with a good website, because I got a good experience from Glenn to design what I wanted, because Milani made it possible for me to feel safe, and because Jonathan made the payment process easy, it means simply this: your competitors who aren't offering that in the same game, in the same name, are way ahead in terms of time, convenience, ease, customization. It puts you into the future with them following. The opportunity is now. If we don't capitalize on the COVID crisis, when everyone is expecting to engage increasingly online, it could be an opportunity lost forever. My panelists, Jonathan Smith from Payfast, Matt Smith, Glenn Gillis, Milani from Billion, thank you so much for giving up extremely valuable and very precious time. Thank you, folks, for the questions you've sent through. We will answer those questions and get them off to you. I'm so sorry time has run out. And I'm going to end off with saying two things. Payfast, once again, thank you so much for sponsoring these events and making them possible. And to all of you out there, start thinking immediately digital from beginning to end. It's a journey, not a destination. Take care. All the best.